She looked me straight in the eyes, folded her arms, and said, "You're not my husband anymore." She wasn't standing in a courtroom. There were no divorce papers on the table. She said it inside the home I had spent 20 years building for us. At that moment, something inside me changed forever. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply walked away, made one phone call, and before the sun came up the next morning, the woman who believed she owned everything was standing outside the locked gates of my $10 million mansion, realizing that one sentence had cost her more than she ever imagined. Daniel often told people that the greatest investment of his life had nothing to do with stocks, real estate, or the company that eventually made him wealthy. It began years earlier, when he met Emily in a neighborhood where dreams were much bigger than bank accounts. They were both young, working ordinary jobs and trying to build a future one paycheck at a time. Their first dates were simple walks through local parks, inexpensive dinners at family-owned restaurants, and evenings spent talking about the lives they hoped to create someday. Neither of them cared about luxury because they had never experienced it. They admired honesty, loyalty, and hard work far more than expensive possessions. Emily encouraged Daniel to believe in himself, even after several business ideas failed. Whenever he came home frustrated, convinced he should quit chasing impossible goals, she reminded him why he had started in the first place. Her confidence gave him the strength to keep moving forward when rejection became part of everyday life. After they married, they rented a modest apartment with aging furniture, unreliable appliances, and barely enough space for the two of them. Yet they laughed often and celebrated every small victory together. When Daniel finally launched his technology business from a cramped garage, he worked long days and even longer nights while Emily handled household responsibilities and managed their limited budget with remarkable discipline. Every dollar they saved was carefully planned, and every success felt like proof that their sacrifices were worthwhile. There were months when bills piled up faster than income, forcing them to postpone vacations, decline invitations, and live far below the lifestyle they dreamed about. Daniel never forgot how Emily stayed beside him through those uncertain years, believing in the business before investors, customers, or competitors ever took it seriously. Slowly, the company expanded, attracting loyal clients and talented employees who shared Daniel's vision. Contracts became larger, profits increased, and opportunities appeared that once seemed impossible. After decades of relentless effort, the business reached extraordinary value and was eventually sold for a fortune, allowing Daniel to purchase a breathtaking $10 million mansion overlooking the ocean, believing it represented not only financial success, but also every promise they had fulfilled together and every hardship they had overcome side by side. At first, the move into the magnificent mansion felt like the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. Emily was thrilled as she walked through the spacious rooms, admired the floor-to-ceiling windows, and planned how every corner would reflect their success. Daniel enjoyed seeing her happy because he believed they had finally reached the life they had spent decades working toward. He encouraged her to decorate the home however she wished, never questioning the cost of custom furniture, artwork, or renovations because he saw the house as a shared reward for years of sacrifice. Their weekends were filled with dinner parties, neighborhood gatherings, and charity events where they met influential people from business, entertainment, and politics. Daniel remained the same humble man who appreciated meaningful conversations and genuine friendships. But Emily slowly became fascinated with prestige and social recognition. She paid increasing attention to designer labels, exclusive memberships, and the opinions of people whose approval seemed to matter more than family. Gradually, her attitude toward Daniel began to change in subtle but painful ways. She corrected him during conversations, laughed at his simple habits, and made light-hearted jokes about his modest upbringing whenever guests visited. Although everyone smiled politely, Daniel could feel the sting behind every remark. He tried to dismiss the comments, convincing himself that she was only trying to fit into a different social circle. As the months passed, Emily spent more time attending private events, luxury retreats, and elite gatherings without inviting Daniel, explaining that he would not enjoy those environments. Their quiet evenings together became increasingly rare, replaced by separate schedules and distant conversations that focused more on appearances than emotions. The warmth that had once defined their marriage slowly faded, leaving behind polite exchanges that felt more like discussions between strangers than conversations between lifelong partners. Friends who had known them for years quietly noticed the growing distance and occasionally asked Daniel if everything was all right at home. He always smiled and assured them that marriage naturally changed over time. Even though he privately sensed that something far deeper was slipping away, the mansion that once symbolized shared dreams gradually became a place where success was celebrated, but affection grew harder to find, while respect quietly disappeared behind polished smiles, expensive parties, and carefully maintained public appearances without either of them openly acknowledging how different their relationship had become. Daniel continued, telling himself that every marriage went through difficult seasons, and he held on to the hope that the distance between him and Emily was only temporary. He believed that if he remained patient, the woman who had stood beside him through years of struggle would eventually return. Instead of confronting every cold remark or cancelled dinner, he focused on giving her space, convinced that trust and understanding were stronger than arguments. But with each passing week, the silence between them grew heavier. Emily seemed far more interested in social gatherings, luxury trips, and maintaining her public image than spending time with the man who had built their life beside her. Daniel often found himself eating dinner alone in the enormous dining room, wondering how two people could share the same home yet feel so far apart. One afternoon, a business meeting ended earlier than expected, allowing him to return home several hours before Emily expected him. As he entered the house, he heard voices coming from the sitting room. Emily was speaking with one of her closest friends, and neither of them realized Daniel had already stepped inside. He paused as he heard Emily say, "I've already moved on emotionally. Daniel is just the man who pays the bills." Her friend sounded surprised and quietly asked why she stayed if she truly felt that way. Emily gave a short laugh before replying, "Why would I leave? Look at this house, the cars, and everything we have. Walking away would make no sense." Daniel stood motionless, unable to believe what he had just heard. He quietly turned around and walked back outside without making a sound, choosing not to reveal that he had listened to every word. For days, he replayed the conversation in his mind, hoping there had been some misunderstanding or that anger had caused Emily to exaggerate her feelings. He still wanted to save the marriage, despite the pain those words had caused. A week later, Daniel suggested they skip another glamorous charity event and spend a quiet evening together at home, hoping they could reconnect without distractions. Emily looked at him with clear frustration before replying that he never understood what truly mattered anymore. Daniel calmly answered that their marriage should matter more than any social event. Emily met his eyes without hesitation and said in a cold, unwavering voice, "You're not my husband anymore," leaving Daniel standing in complete silence as she picked up her handbag, walked out the front door, and closed it behind her. Daniel remained standing in the silent hallway long after the front door closed behind Emily. The sound of her footsteps faded, but the words she had spoken continued echoing through his mind. Surprisingly, he felt no desire to chase after her or argue. The anger he expected never arrived. Instead, a calm sense of certainty replaced the confusion he had carried for months. He realized that the marriage he had been trying so hard to protect had already disappeared long before that evening. Without raising his voice or making an emotional decision, he walked into his home office and called the attorney who had handled his business affairs for years. Daniel explained everything that had happened and asked only one question about his legal rights concerning the mansion. After carefully reviewing the ownership documents once again, the attorney confirmed that the estate had been purchased through Daniel's protected investment structure after the sale of his company, and remained solely under his ownership. He also explained that Daniel had every legal right to control access to the private residence. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it gave Daniel the clarity he needed. Early the next morning, he contacted the estate manager and security company. Every access code connected to the property was replaced. Digital entry cards were cancelled. Garage remotes were deactivated, and biometric permissions were updated. The security staff received clear instructions that no one was to enter the property without Daniel's direct authorization. There was no drama, no public announcement, and no attempt to embarrass Emily. Everything was handled quietly and professionally. Later that afternoon, the security cameras showed Emily's luxury SUV approaching the entrance. She slowed to a stop in front of the tall iron gates and pressed the remote control as she had done countless times before. Nothing happened. She tried again, looking confused as the gates remained closed. After stepping out of the vehicle, she walked to the intercom and attempted to contact security. Moments later, Daniel's phone rang. Emily demanded to know why the gate would not open. Daniel answered calmly that he had changed the access permissions. She insisted that he could not do such a thing because it was her home as well. Daniel quietly reminded her of the words she had spoken the previous evening before ending the conversation, while Emily remained standing outside the locked gates. Finally realizing that her choices carried consequences she had never expected. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations, legal appointments, and long periods of quiet reflection. Daniel refused to speak negatively about Emily in public. Even when friends and business associates began asking questions about why they were no longer seen together. Rumors spread quickly through their social circles. Some people claimed Daniel had become controlling after gaining wealth, while others insisted Emily had chosen to leave because she wanted a different life. Daniel ignored every version of the story because he understood that defending himself against gossip would only create more unnecessary conflict. He instructed his attorney to handle every legal matter with professionalism and respect, making it clear that he wanted a fair resolution rather than a bitter fight. Weeks later, Emily requested a private meeting before the legal process moved any further. They met in a quiet conference room with their attorneys waiting nearby, giving them a few moments to speak alone. Emily appeared different from the confident woman who had walked away from the mansion. She looked tired, emotionally drained, and far less certain about the decisions she had made. After several moments of silence, she admitted that she had never believed Daniel would actually let her leave. She confessed that she had assumed he would continue chasing after her, apologizing even when he had done nothing wrong, just as he had often tried to repair every disagreement during their marriage. Daniel listened carefully without interrupting. When she finished speaking, he calmly explained that he had spent years fighting for their relationship. While she slowly walked away from it, one choice at a time, he reminded her that relationships rarely collapse because of a single argument. Instead, they are weakened by countless moments when respect, appreciation, and honesty slowly disappear until one final conversation reveals what has already become true. Emily lowered her eyes, unable to disagree with his words. After the meeting ended, Daniel drove back to the mansion alone. As he walked through the quiet rooms, he noticed that nothing inside the house had physically changed. The artwork still hung on the walls. The ocean still stretched beyond the windows, and every expensive possession remained exactly where it had always been. Yet the atmosphere felt completely different, because, for the first time in years, the home was filled with peace instead of tension, reminding Daniel that genuine wealth is measured not by the value of a mansion, but by the ability to protect one's dignity, self-respect, and peace of mind when everything else begins to fall apart.